right, everyone, thanks so much for tuning into Behind the Masterpiece. I am your host, Brian Hersh. I also happen to be the CEO for the Arts and Cultural Alliance of Sarasota County. And with us today is the incredible Managing Director for Florida Studio Theater, Rebecca Hopkins. So, Rebecca, Florida Studio Theater, outstanding work, amazing theater in Sarasota County. For those who don't know and might be visiting Sarasota, how would you explain Florida Studio's feel and its style and its aesthetic, if you will?
Well, we're very different than almost anybody in the country because we have 5 theaters in a campus situation in downtown Sarasota, and they're all small, intimate theaters. But I would describe Sarasota, we have always been described as Sarasota's contemporary theater. So everything you see here is going to be the most recent Broadway, off-Broadway, new plays. It's new and exciting work in that film. But it's also an intimate space. We're actor-based theater, so your relationship between the actor and the audience is very specific. Our largest house only seats 237. I have one that seats 173, and then I've got 3 that seat 100. At the same time, I'm reaching about 225,000 people a year. So that's a lot of people going in and out of those spaces. And when you come every night, it's kind of like going to a theater festival because people are going to 5 different experiences that intermix it a lot.
It's a lot. Wow, you're bringing a lot of folks through, but there's so many different ways to experience Florida Studio Theater. And by the way, of course, people can get information and buy tickets by going to floridastudiotheater.org. They can also listen to this podcast by going to visitsarasota.com as well. But Rebecca, when you have that many stages, that many houses, and I think one of the things, with accessibility, there is something that everyone's going to find. How do you plan and select a season with such breadth?
Continually. I mean, that's the first answer. Because we actually do operate 52 weeks out of the year, which is also unusual. So no matter when you come to Sarasota, you can see a show at FST. So we have what are our winter seasons, which we're in right now. And that's kind of your peak where I've got everything running. And then in summer, we also have 2 different seasons going on. So to select the season, it's about what series it's in, because we've got all types of different series. So, for example, we have our main stage, which is very much your Broadway, off-Broadway work. It's more broad-based. It's going to speak to a larger audience because it has a very large audience. I've got 12,000 subscribers in there to begin with, and then you add single ticket buyers in there. So it has to speak to a broad amount of people. So like right now we're doing Waitress, but next we have a relatively new play that people haven't heard of, which is Heart Sellers. It's opening actually tomorrow night, and a lovely new piece. It's a play, a new play. And then we'll go on and we'll do the Cancellation of Lauren Fine, which is going to be a more edgy piece that anchors the main stage before we end it out with Jersey Boys. So it's a broad swath of contemporary theater in there. Then you'll get the cabaret, which is musical reviews. So those are mainly built here, and a lot of work goes into speaking to this audience. And it's all types of music. We started with the 40s. We're in the 70s and 80s now with the audience. So selection of plays is first and foremost, what series is it in? And then who is that audience? But we have a team, our literary department, that literally tracks every English-speaking play being produced in the world. We've got, AI and Google, and so we're watching reviews, we're requesting those scripts. We get stuff pitched to us that are new plays. And so we have a playwrights collective we work with. So it's a combination of all that. And then it goes through a reader's circle process where people are reading these plays and rating them based on not if it's a good play or not, but will it speak to this audience or not. And then it goes up to staff reads and we're engaged. But at the end of the day, our artistic director, he decides. It's buck stops here. At the end of the day, he says, these are the ones we're doing. But they have to speak to each other. So that's kind of a nutshell of our process. It's pretty intense and always ongoing.
I love it. Thanks for taking us behind the curtain or behind the masterpiece. That was really cool to see, even just using, with being so contemporary, but also plugging into those leverages.
Oh, yeah.
AI can work for that, right? How
We
cool.
could never do what we do. We talk about this often, that FSC could never produce what it produces or reach the number without computers. I mean, the number of people it would take in a box office if we were doing this manually, it'd be impossible. But we utilize all that technology just like everybody else to help us do our job.
Yeah, no, amazing. Rebecca Hopkins, the managing director of Florida Studio Theater. You can always go to floridastudiotheater.org to find info about all those series she was just talking about and buy tickets as well. Richard Hopkins, who is that artistic director that you're talking about, who gets to make those selections, has quite a history with the organization too, no doubt. Talk to us a little bit. So, as managing director, so many pieces from the marketing campaigns, making sure, just as what you're saying, it reaches people. We know so many people are visiting Sarasota, and I love how you talked about that footprint and proximity. You're right in the heart of downtown. Florida Studio Theater, so important for that. But how do you organize all those folks putting on all those productions? From not only are then the actors that we see, but you have a whole slew of folks who are making the work technically to happen. How do you organize all of that?
It's a lot of logistical nightmare, but I mean, that's, Showtime's, the hardest thing we do is organize the audience. When you have 5 shows going at one time, that's, although our whole capacity is, 1,700 people, but I'm sorry, it's 750. When we build new, it's going to be 1,700.
All right, good number.
But it's about bringing those cars in and bring those houses entering and exiting and how they're going to interact with downtown, so we're not overcrowded at any time. So a lot goes into, I have a massive amount of Excel spreadsheets that show if this show goes up at this time, typically it's going to hit intermission at this time, which means the bathroom lines for this show are going to be here and here. And they go to the restaurant at this time, and parking will flow through this way. You really have to put a lot of thought into this stuff, because the patron experience is a huge part. If they have a bad experience just getting here before they go see the play, that's their mindset when they see the play. So we put a lot of effort into making our campus extremely welcoming, and a lot of advance on how to come so you can interact with our box office, so you know what to wear, so you know where to park when you come, because there's 5 different places to park. What's the best for the theater you're actually attending? And how to make restaurant reservations, because one of the great things we have is we have our green room restaurant, and our cabarets are a restaurant inside the theater itself where you can order off the menu. Well, that's one convenient shopping for people. They come, they park, they can spend the whole night, have dinner, watch the show, have drinks, then walk right into downtown to all those restaurants and all the activities there. Wonderful being downtown, but with downtown comes all of those logistics that you have to make the traffic flow.
Yeah, incredible. I know so much of a priority for Florida Studio Theater is accessibility and affordability, and it sounds like you've got a lot of different ways for people to experience things, whether it's the main stage, cabaret, stage 3, improv. I know my mom just saw Waitress, and she's a subscriber, loves going. I can't wait to see Heart Cellar as well. What are some of the other highlights? And maybe even you've got a stage 3. You've got so many things. How do you do? What's that? What's on stage 3, and why have you sort of had that stage?
So stage 3 is wonderful. Stage 3 is actually a return to our roots. Florida Studio Theater was founded as an alternative theater company, and we toured to like prison camps and migrant farms and did really edgy work. That was our very beginning day. And so what happened is, as the theater was growing and that main stage audience was getting bigger and bigger, the work needed to go more universal, because it was speaking to a very broad audience. But there's these avid theater goers, including the people who work here, who are avid theater, who want to do that more challenging, edgier work that really isn't for everyone. It's for the theater aficionado, or the people who like to, get down and wrestle with stuff. And so we opened stage 3 to serve that it is a theater where you're going to be challenged in content or form. Sometimes the form is the most challenging thing that happens. We once did a play that was in hip hop, and this was a decade ago. And that was the challenge. The play was pretty straightforward, but the language in it and the way it was delivered was the challenging part. But this, we're doing a show this season, for example, Bad Books, which is very timely, very topical. It is about book banning, and it's a two-person play where both characters are coming from their own truth, their own heart. One is a parent who is upset that wants a book pulled from the shelves that her son brought home, that she thinks is highly inappropriate. And the other is the librarian, and they both come at it from their truth. And that's what's wonderful about the play is neither is villainized, but it really spins out of control, and you see the impact. So putting those type of stories on the stage that the community is still trying for itself to figure out the answer to, and this is a way for us to do it. We go to the theater. It's called play for a reason. It's to tell the stories of human interaction and see what happens. And so we as a community can figure out our way forward. It's a way for us to practice. Like, what happens if we do this? What happens if we do that? What's the outcome of this thing in human terms, not talking head terms? And then that gives the community somewhere to go with it. Those are the type of shows you're going to see in Stage 3.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then we got our children's series because I want to go we really, our first mission point is to be affordable and accessible to as many people as possible. And accessibility, a large part of that is diversity of thought and type of work. That's why we have a cabaret theater, which is largely entertainment-based, musical theater-based. Then you got the main stage. Then you got Stage 3 for the challenging. But then you got the children's theater because, everybody talks about you need to introduce kids to theater to your future audience. Well, that's all great and wonderful, but our view is children are people and they deserve theater too. So we have this program that works in the schools that's called the Write a Play program, which reaches about 40,000 kids a year, inspiring them to write plays. And then we took that and leveraged it into a weekend family series. So families could come and bring their kids and see a show. Like right now we're doing Deck the Halls, which is our annual Christmas and holidays and everything in Sarasota, which is very different than the rest of the country. We don't have snow. We have sand. So all that's going on, but it's all about that mission in order to give people their gateway into the theater. Richard always says, we meet our audience where we find them, and then we build from there. And it really does work. There's a synergy. They go see the cabaret, and they're like, what's this main stage thing across the way? Or they go to the improv show on Saturday night. We get a very different audience for improv of people who aren't necessarily theater goers at all. And they're coming to that comedy, but then they look around and go, well, wait a minute, this place is pretty cool. And they experiment and cross over. Yeah.
It's a pretty cool place. Rebecca has taken us behind the curtain on so many things, Florida studio theater related. I love and appreciate how you're talking about how the pieces speak with each other. Mm-hmm. And I think you've really highlighted how much arts builds community. Oh, yeah. I think it's a beacon and welcomes so many people to come here to this community. You know that Sarasota is an arts community for sure. You've been, even though I know you just celebrated your 21st birthday last week, I'm pretty sure you've been at Florida Studio Theater since the moment you were born to an extent. What makes things so exciting for all the time that you've spent at Florida Studio Theater, and what brings you to work every single day?
Yeah, I've actually been here for 27 years. Which is a very long time. And the interesting thing is when I came, I thought I'd be here for a year. I'd never heard of Sarasota, never heard of Florida Studio Theater, but I just fell in love with the work we were doing and the audience. The audience was so engaged to go in these houses, and they were full and attentive and so excited to be there that it was my dream theater. And that has maintained all these years as we've grown. We were a lot smaller back then. We had the main stage, and we had just opened the first cabaret. And but now, we're way up there and grown a huge audience. But that has always stayed, that the audience has been so engaged and participatory, and it is about a community. That's the reason you go to live theater, and that's what the purpose of a regional theater is it's professional theater bringing the arts into the local community, your region, and serving that region with high-end professional work. You're always in conversation. I mean, that's the advantage, that we not only get to speak to guests coming into town, which we love. To us, in all honesty, a visitor to Sarasota is a future resident to Sarasota. We're doing our best pitch on, this is why you should move here. This really is paradise. So we're constantly inviting new people in, and Sarasota is great about that because nobody's from here. And everybody started as a tourist. And then they come and they become snowbirds, and then they eventually become full-time residents. But it's that audience and that constant evolution that has kept me engaged. The FST has always been about moving forward and what more can we do. More doesn't mean create a whole bunch of new programs. We've got plenty of programs, but how do we expand their reach? How do we make sure we're reaching more people? What's that next show that's really going to challenge us? I mean, even a show like Waitress, for example, there's 400 props in that show. It was a challenge, to figure out how to do that. Theater, as we've evolved, how we're dealing with technology and how that is integrating on the stage. There's amazing art being done with projection and different types of lighting. It's always evolving, and that keeps me grounded. But the biggest thing is, I've had many opportunities. There's two types of people in my field. One, the people who move from theater to theater, okay, and those who stay with a company. And I always wanted to be part of a company. I always wanted to be with a theater, stay with the theater, grow that theater, and because I want that community connection. And I get that in Sarasota. I've been part of this community for, going on 30 years, for all its good sides and bad. And I've seen it go through cycles of up and down. But by staying and working with one organization, you really get to build something, and you get to be proud of it as that organization gets better and better and better, because that focus. We have a lot of people who've been here a long time, and they're very focused and committed to the work we're putting on our stage.
I think you're very on point. I think as people get to know, or if they haven't known Florida Studio Theater, there's a positive, progressive consistency. I think people really feel welcome. They always want to see something new, and it's a great spot. But you also, as we talk about the productions talking to themselves and each other, we talk about arts building community. I think one thing that I know about you, you really have your finger on the pulse of the ecosystem. To an extent that, you talked about visiting folks who come, but then they end up moving to Sarasota, which happens all the time. But can you talk about this ecosystem of sort of arts as a business, and also how it's connected to our other businesses? You're walking distance from so many businesses, whether it's the hospitality industry, from hotels to our restaurants. And there's a great, again, interplay or talking from all these arts sectors like you to our restaurants and hotels. Can you highlight that a little bit?
No, I mean, that's the synergy of it all. I mean, any city in the country who's trying to build up their downtown, the first thing they do is invite artists in, because artists are destination drivers. People want to do things. They have to have more than their job to do. You don't go visit a location to do nothing. Well, I do sometimes.
Sometimes. To unplug, we sometimes do.
But, you typically are looking like, okay, I'm going to the beach. What am I going to do at night? Where am I going to go? Or what else do they have going on? And Sarasota has always been so in touch with that as a whole. We are such an arts community, and that's what has kept me here, is that the arts community is so thriving. It's not just my theater. There are multiple professional theaters. I'm right across the street from an opera company. We got a touring company. We got an orchestra. We got museums. We've got one of the best botanical gardens. we've got it all. You know, and then you add the sports on top of it that has grown up since I've been here. We used to have spring training, but now we have a lot of different sporting events. It's that tapestry that creates it, but the arts drive people to participate in their environment. People want to go to a show. They'll come downtown. They'll have dinner in a restaurant. They make an evening out of it. It's a special night. It's not your every given night. They'll have dinner. They'll buy clothes to go to it. You know, they'll stay in a hotel because they're out of town to see a show. All of that ties together. When FSC first came downtown, you could have shot a cannon down Palm Avenue and Main Street. It was literally boarded up. FSC was one of the first destinations to open, so people would have a reason to come downtown. And then you had us and the opera driving all of this. And all you had to do is come down on any night that FSC and the opera are running, and you can see the impact firsthand. The restaurants are full. People are everywhere. And when we hit the pandemic, even when the restaurants were trying to reopen, the fact that none of us were open was really hurting them, because it wasn't enough just to go downtown to have dinner. You needed more than that. And I know that's true for all our arts organizations. We're driving all of this business and interaction. That's why our local realtors list us as like the first thing. And that's why the restaurants are so supportive. We're very connected with all the business. And but it's all working. That's how you make a community. The thing that always got me about this, when people debate this stuff, is like, that's how you make a community. That you have all these different things, and they work together. So we play with the sports plays with us. We're all intermixed in each other's business. But that's how we created such a great place to be.
It is. You've got a lot that kudos to you and so many folks at Florida Studio Theater. Rebecca, last thing I want you to touch on, I thought was just really interesting as well. I think as you talk about that downtown, that proximity in so many ways. But one thing that you've done really brilliantly that I don't know if everyone picked up on is, yes, people can go to all these amazing different things, from our beaches to our restaurants, but you and many of our other arts organizations, you've built a great model that if people really enjoy and experience what you have, people can keep coming back while they visit. And I think that's what's really cool. How did that play into your strategy, and just really that you have so many different ways for people to experience Florida Studio Theater?
I would tell you it's the core of who we were when we were founded, and we have just always maintained that affordable, accessible idea. When the theater was founded, Richard really, when he took over, it was, as I said, he took over in 1980 from John Spellman, who founded the theater, and he created the resident company. And the idea was that people could afford to go to the theater as much as they could afford to go to a movie. It shouldn't be a special event. And so we created our subscriptions, which are the lowest price in the country. And so, like, the most you pay for a 4-show subscription to FSC right now is $109. Okay, that's $20 ticket. You know, so you can afford to come. And even our single ticket prices, we're always looking for ways to make offers and stuff. So we don't want price to be a barrier. We have to charge. It is actually really expensive to do what we do. But what we do is balance this high caliber work, the best actors, the best directors, everyone we can get, very high end work, with low prices, with high volume. So we have the largest subscription base in all of our theaters of any theater in the state of Florida and in the Southeast. We're like number 3 in the nation. And it's because we're keeping that in balance. But I need that large audience. Without that large audience, I can't keep the caliber of the work up, and I can't keep the prices where they are. So it's always about keeping it in balance. But it's taken, 50 years of consistent work to do that, and staying very mission focused. And I recommend anybody starting a theater do that, because that works. That people want to come. Your work has to be good, and it has to be at a rate they can afford to come. Yeah.
No doubt. Florida Studio Theater, a pillar of consistency, accessibility, and engagement and entertainment in so many ways. Something for so many of our visitors, of our residents. Arts builds community. Florida Studio Theater being a nexus and a center point, focal point of downtown. Rebecca Hopkins, Managing Director. You can always go to floridastudiotheater.org to buy tickets. Go to visitsarasota.com. I'm your host, Brian Hersh of Behind the Masterpiece. Rebecca, thanks so much for being on Behind the Masterpiece.
Oh, thanks. Oh, it was fun. Anytime.
Happy to do it. All right, everyone. Until next time, we'll catch you later. Thanks for listening to this episode of Behind the Masterpiece, brought to you by Visit Sarasota County. For more and to hear this podcast, go to visitsarasota.com.